Story 1. My best friend of over 20 years and I both had children about the same age, and our daughters were also best friends. She left her then 15-year-old with me for a week while she went on a trip to Bali. During that time, her daughter attempted to end her life. I took her to the hospital, ensured she received care, sat by her bed for 3 days, coordinated with a social worker, connected her with the local mental health unit and youth services team, and developed a plan to help her recover and move forward. I contacted her mother on the first day and kept her informed. However, this woman not only refused to change her flights and come home because it would have cost $200, she also told me, "You don't have to go to the hospital every day to sit with her. That's what the nurses are for." When she finally returned, she was upset with me for parenting her child behind her back. I am still in contact with the girl. She is living independently and working as a baker's apprentice. She has cut off contact with her mother but still calls me when she needs an adult to talk to. I will never speak to that friend again. Story 2. They kept borrowing money from me to feed their kids or to get their kids' medication, claiming it was an emergency. Truly, they were destitute and those instances seemed plausible. However, one day, after being told one of the kids had been hospitalized and released home, I logged onto Facebook and saw pictures of them, sick kid included, at a block party. That destroyed the friendship for me. For the record, I never expected them to pay back the money I lent for food or medicine. I was happy to help. Those kids felt like my kids, too. It was the betrayal and the realization that I wasn't loved as I loved that hurt the most. Story 3. I felt that I was doing all the legwork. I started every conversation and was the first one to email or text. One day, I decided I was going to wait for her to message first. And here we are 18 years later. Story 4. She started routinely paying rent weeks late and blocked me from her social media so she could secretly post about attending concerts and music festivals with her rent money. Story 5. When I realized that being a good friend to her was actually just me being a caretaker with poor boundaries and enduring years of emotional abuse, it was completely life-changing. Story 6. He dated my best friend, who met him because of me, and she completely broke his heart and cheated on him. It was awful, and I regret introducing them. Our friendship faded during their relationship, and after they broke up, it was clearly over. It's unfortunate, but I understand. I still miss him and hope he's happier now that he's away from everyone. Story 7. Everything was a competition that my friend had to win. The day she noticed my brand new jug and said that hers was bigger was the day I realized I didn't want to be friends anymore. Story 8. Everything was someone else's fault, both on macro and micro levels. If there was an interpersonal issue, it was never his fault. Relationship problems were always his partner's fault, even when the same reasons caused each breakup. If he got into a verbal altercation at the bar, it was completely someone else's fault. It was too exhausting. Story 9. When I was a freshman in college, I shared a room with my best friend from high school. I kept a diary that I wrote in every day and hid it in my locked closet. One day, I returned from class to find her reading aloud from my diary to a group of our friends. She had broken into the closet just to get the diary. I haven't spoken to her in over 30 years. Story 10. She became very insecure and jealous when I started law school. I visited home after my first semester, and we caught up over coffee. From my perspective, I experienced severe imposter syndrome. School was stressful and challenging, but I was learning a lot, pushing myself, and meeting wonderful people. She started to distance herself, canceling phone dates and generally ignoring me. When I finally got in touch with her, she told me, "You went off to law school and suddenly thought you were better and smarter than everyone else." I was shocked. That narrative existed nowhere but in her own mind. I told her she was mistaken and that her perspective hurt my feelings. She cried and yelled, "I know. I'm struggling with friendships with women. That was the last time we ever spoke." Story 11. He kept having children with different girls and then abandoning them. I could no longer watch it. I left after the third girl. I am pretty sure he has 6 or 7 children now. Story 12. I learned that day that anything could go wrong in an instant. My best friend, who was like a sister to me, had her eyes on my boyfriend for a long time. I was too trusting to notice it at that moment, but later, I caught them together in my room when I was away, only to find out it wasn't their first time and I had been deceived all along. I felt so bad and traumatized. How could she be so cruel? And how could he betray my love for him? I felt used. Story 13. She was a key witness in my rape trial but was too reluctant to go to the police station to make a statement. She had 3 years to do it. I lost the trial, but it was close. I will always wonder if I would have received justice if she had done it. Story 14. I was diagnosed with cancer a year after moving across the country away from my friends from high school. I didn't ask them to do much, just to play some online games with me while I recovered from surgery. Not one of them did. I could see in my various friends' lists that they were playing other games, but none of them would set aside their current games to keep me company and take my mind off things. No texts, no phone calls, nothing. All I asked for was some time and online company, and they made no effort. This was the last straw in a long series of feeling like an afterthought. It's been 9 years, and not a single one of them has tried to contact me since then. It seems that being an afterthought was even too optimistic. Story 15. I had been extremely judgmental for years. After being a pushover for so long, when I finally stood up for myself and expressed that I felt hurt by her words, she told me she wasn't sorry multiple times and used therapeutic language to justify her behavior. At the same time, I was going through a breakup, my cat of 10 years died, and I had a prolonged cold that just wouldn't go away. I couldn't talk to her for a while after that, but when she finally reached out again, she asked what she could do to mend our relationship, aside from apologizing. All I needed was an apology, and she couldn't even provide that. Story 16. The straw. My mom is apparently dying. We have been friends for decades. She distanced herself from me when my mom died of cancer. I talked to her about it, and she said she felt I wanted space. I let her know I needed her in my life, especially now, and she promised to do better. However, when I stopped being the one to initiate contact, I never heard from her again. It's been 4 years. We experienced typical life events together, but she was also there for me when my dad died a decade ago. We went through a house fire her family suffered, and we navigated all major life changes together. I still love her, and I hope she is doing well. Story 17. We were supposed to move in together. It was the first step away from our parents. Fortunately, we were renting from my parents. The night before our move-in date, he called to say he had obtained his own apartment earlier that day without me. He then listed everything about me that annoyed him along with every mistake and flaw he knew about. Since he was my best friend, it was a lot. There were no signs this was coming. We had only argued a couple of times. I never realized so much about me was distasteful to him. I was devastated. A couple of weeks later, he called and came over to talk. He was very apologetic. I would have understood had he told me he had a breakdown and realized he needed to live on his own. Knowing it would complicate things for me, he made it my fault. He said he didn't mean any of it and was horrified by how he treated me. Yet his criticisms were detailed and specific, going back years to incidents I had no idea were issues. There was just no way to fix it. I could never feel comfortable or trust him again. On one hand, I miss some people I used to know. I don't miss him or think of him often or with fondness. My daughter doesn't recognize him when she sees old pictures of us. But she knows about my other old friends since I mentioned them. On the other hand, it's been 20 years. It's hard for me to have close friends because I feel like they might be building lists of things I do wrong and ways I am not enough. Maybe they'll call one day when I least expect it and list it all. It wasn't good. Story 18. He yelled at me for correcting him on the pronunciation of a word, something he did to me constantly, despite being wrong. He yelled and yelled at me. I said I was done, goodbye, but not before calmly getting in one remark at him. Story 19. I supported her through a difficult breakup, canceling her wedding the morning of to an abusive alcoholic, along with countless other personal tragedies over the past decade. She has a wonderful heart but struggles to overcome her own obstacles and is unreceptive to any advice, no matter how gentle. I became concerned about her mental health as I noticed it declining, and had a serious conversation with her and two other friends in a supportive, safe setting. She lashed out at me, saying she was tired of my drama and didn't need me as a friend if I couldn't support her. I told her that if by support, she meant watch her spiral into another black hole needing help to crawl out. Then she was correct. I said, I am always here to help you, but I can't watch this and do nothing. She never spoke to me again. It broke my heart, but after talking to another former friend of hers with a similar experience, I realized this is just her pattern. Story 20. I had a realization after my current girlfriend told me he made a pass at her while knowing we were dating. He's done the same with nearly every woman I've dated, and for various reasons, I would forgive him or let it go because of extenuating circumstances. I don't know why, but after that last time, I decided that I don't care about his excuses. Trying to actively sabotage my relationships is not something I should have to tell a friend is unacceptable, let alone reiterate every time I enter a new relationship. Story 21. She faked dying of cancer. People are asking for the story. I have never written it down. English isn't my first language, and it still upsets me deeply, so bear with me. Her name is Nina, and yes, that's her real name because I am done caring. We were best friends since our teens, through our youth and 20s. I didn't have much contact with her in our 30s, mostly because I moved for my career. Yet I remained very fond of her and would have lent her $3,000 during the pandemic to keep her business afloat in a heartbeat. Contact almost dried up after that. I attributed it to the fact that my proud friend was too ashamed to owe me money without being able to pay me back. 2 years later, she wrote me a message out of the blue in the dead of night, saying, "Thank you for everything you did for me. I want you to know that I will always love you." I called her immediately. She was sobbing, telling me she was dying of cancer like her mother did when we were 19. She said she refused to continue with chemotherapy and that it would be over in less than a year. I cried with her, offered my help, and asked if it would be okay if I visited her, but she refused. In the following months, I checked in with her, sent her messages and pictures from back in the day, and asked if I could do anything. I also eased her mind about the money she still owed me. She barely wrote back, wouldn't let me visit her, and wouldn't pick up the phone. I would be lying if I said her behavior didn't raise some red flags with me. But hey, this is Nina, my oldest friend, so I brushed it off, telling myself I had to respect my dying friend's wishes and grieved alone. Then, about 3 months later, her ex called me. He was the man she had been with for more than 10 years and, as she had told me, someone who threw her out on the street 2 years ago, during a pandemic, which made me hate him and never contact him again. The first thing he did was apologize for not calling earlier, saying he needed some time to recover. Then he unloaded. Nina told him 2 years prior almost the same thing she had told me a few months back, that she had lung cancer and that the odds weren't in her favor. He tried to support her as best he could. He is chronically ill and lives on a disability pension. He would cook for her, plant her favorite flowers in their garden, and make a collage of pictures of her mom. After spending a beautiful evening together, she would say things like, "You know, this might be one of our last happy nights together," crushing him every time. She pretended to have chemotherapy on weekends for several days at a time. He wasn't allowed to visit and was only permitted to accompany her to the entrance outside the hospital because she needed to do this on her own. During her hospital stay, she would write him messages like, "The rescue helicopters are flying like crazy today." And I know it sounds insane in hindsight that he didn't see through it for so long, but you don't think anyone is capable of pulling something like this off, especially not a person you love and believe you know wholeheartedly. The level of manipulation and the sheer sophistication with which she made the big lie believable through an endless stream of tiny lies is frightening. But well, everyone has to learn at some point, I guess. One weekend while she was pretending to have chemotherapy, she went silent, which was unusual since they would message several times a day and have a phone call every night. He was worried sick and called the hospital in a panic, fearing the worst. The receptionist said she would have to check with other staff since there was nothing in her computer. She called him back after a while to let him know there was no patient with the name Nina at the hospital. After a pause, she said, "I am sorry, sir, but a Nina hasn't been a patient in this hospital for years. This is not a large city." There is no other hospital that does chemotherapy within a 2-hour drive. And it was the same hospital where she allowed him to drop her off occasionally. That poor man. I feel terrible for thinking so poorly of him for so long. After the phone call, he was still in disbelief. So he called the woman with whom Nina shared her shop, who was also very surprised to hear that Nina and he were still a couple and living together because Nina had told her they broke up. This was very believable since she had been seeing another man who rented her a tiny flat near the shop. A lawyer, a married man with 2 children, mind you. Like Nina's father who left her, her brother, and their sick mother for his affair partner back in the day. The affair with the lawyer started 2 years prior. Apparently, Nina had also sold her share of the shop a while back, which was news to her ex and to me as well. He confronted her when she came home on Sunday night after chemotherapy. Turns out she never had cancer. She made it up to cover up the affair. The reason he couldn't reach her the entire weekend was that she was on a trip to Italy with her lawyer and lost her phone. And yes, she deliberately told me and other people close to her that he had thrown her out on the street to prevent us from talking to each other because we weren't supposed to know about her cancer. He, of course, threw her out immediately, and this time it was real. It was the same night she told me she had cancer. Here's the thing. I knew every word he told me was true. I knew it in my heart. There were signs, tiny red flags, things that didn't add up. Tons of it over the course of a friendship that lasted decades. But I also didn't want to believe it, so I made my own phone calls. I called the woman with whom Nina had her shop, called people from back in the day, and others living in the same small city who might know her. Well, it turns out the woman I thought was one of my oldest, dearest friends, my tiny Nina, is a deeply deranged, incredibly cruel, and cold-hearted person who leaves a path of destruction in her wake. I don't know what went wrong, whether it was her mother's death, who truly was one of the greatest, kindest, funniest women I have ever met, that triggered this sickness in Nina, or if it has always been lurking. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I haven't contacted Nina since her ex called me that evening. He and I have become friends again, trying to help each other heal from her. Nina hasn't contacted me either. She probably knows what's up. I don't care. I got my closure by ensuring the lawyer's wife knows what her husband is up to. And if you happen to be reading this, Nina, yeah, it was me. You can keep the money if you promise I never have to see your face again. Story 22. He was foaming at the mouth, saying he was going to kill me while swinging a baseball bat and destroying his own kitchen. Story 23. I found out he slept with my high school girlfriend and kept that secret for 10 years. He also invited my 13-year-old sister to drink and party with his and our friends. I drew the line, ended the friendship, and punched him in the jaw for that one. I didn't learn he had slept with my high school girlfriend until many years after the friendship ended. But that made a lot of things make complete sense. He was always extremely angry whenever I spent time with her. He was never truly a friend. Story 24. My best friend of 19 years encouraged me to talk to a guy at a wedding. We hit it off and started a long-distance relationship. However, my friend gave me the silent treatment for 3 weeks, including on my birthday, after I mentioned that the relationship was going well. Eventually, she started talking to me again, but never explained her behavior or apologized for acting immaturely. She never expressed happiness for me or provided any support for my new relationship. When we resumed hanging out, I kept my distance emotionally, questioning why she had become upset about my relationship with someone she had initially encouraged me to pursue. After a year and a half of spending time together, I discovered that she was speaking negatively about my relationship behind my back. That crossed the line for me, so I decided to block her on everything and move on. Since cutting her off, I've experienced much less stress in my life. She is no longer my best friend. Story 25. He was a veteran and a staunch proponent of freedom of speech. He believed that anyone can say whatever they want and that there should never be any repercussions for their words. I explained that the guarantee of freedom of speech in the United States simply means the government cannot arrest you. It does not mean freedom from social repercussions. He disagreed so fiercely that he blocked me and has not spoken to me since, thereby proving my point ironically. Story 26. She supported the woman responsible for my children's father's death. My ex-husband and I were great co-parents. We just weren't good as a couple. The woman he was with observed his symptoms and waited until he was nonverbal and unable to walk before calling a friend for a ride to the doctor. Not an ambulance. He was airlifted and unfortunately passed away from a brain bleed. He could have been saved if he had received proper treatment. Story 27. I am a fairly introverted person. I don't need a lot of attention. My friend, who was also my cousin, was the opposite. She brought drama wherever she went, and it was always about her. She was fun to be around, though I found it somewhat entertaining, but as we got older, it started to wear on me. Then, I went through something really traumatic and needed support. She couldn't offer any. There just wasn't any way she could insert herself into my crisis, so she wasn't interested. That was the last straw. She reached out every few years, and I basically told her to leave me alone. The last time she messaged me, I simply didn't respond. I couldn't even be bothered. Story 28. My best friend lied to a man, claiming she was infertile, and then got pregnant immediately. It seemed to happen the very day they met, based on when the doctors predicted her pregnancy. She has done this twice before with 2 other men. At this point, it has become a pattern. She spent years convincing everyone that she was disabled, which is fine, as I have no issue with individuals who have disabilities. However, she continued to involve men in her life by having children she could not financially support. Since her disability is mental, she is not providing a stable environment for the children. When she decided to keep her last child, I quickly ended our friendship because I could not watch another child become a victim of her actions. Story 29. She joined a cult, and I couldn't connect with that. I told her how I felt, but she didn't appreciate it and removed me from her life. Story 30. During COVID, he went on a long rant about how disabled people should be allowed to die so he wouldn't have to be in lockdown. I am disabled. Story 31. She told everyone that I was being dramatic after my dad died. It turns out that losing a parent was an inconvenience to her weekend plans. I haven't spoken to her since, and it has been much more peaceful. Story 32. She invited me to her birthday party that was happening that weekend, which was a last-minute request. I told her I couldn't attend because I already had plans to see family visiting from out of town, whom I hadn't seen in years. She got angry and said many hurtful things, including how much of a bad friend I was for not canceling my plans to go to her party. She was turning 32. We never really talked again. Coincidentally, I was also feeling unwell that week because, little did I know, I was pregnant and about to experience severe morning sickness. Story 33. She told me that what happened to me really wasn't that bad when I started my recovery from an abusive relationship. Story 34. Taking an argument to the internet. They cropped one sentence from a very long message to make me look like the villain. They also did this the day after I attended my uncle's funeral. Story 35. I was in the middle of a divorce, and my childhood best friend told me that I was not a good Christian and that I deserved to be mentally abused. She spread lies to my family, claiming I was using drugs and drinking excessively every night, making my life much harder during an already difficult time. A few years later, she also got divorced, but it was deemed acceptable because it was believed that God wanted her to leave him. She has attempted to reach out over the years to gather information about my life to share with my parents, as we are technically related by marriage, and to create drama. I had to delete all social media to make her leave me alone. Story 36. I overheard her laughing with her family about my fictional tragic backstory. It turned out she didn't believe many of the things I had told her about my life and was happy to discuss that with others. I had always thought she was one of those fundamentally decent people you meet so rarely. Turns out there are even fewer of them than I realized. Story 37. Distance, I guess? When my parents and I migrated to the UK, I started school but was unhappy there. In my second year, I was moved and he became my first of very few friends at that school. We were basically inseparable until we graduated 4 years later. He went to a different secondary school and we kind of lost contact. After that, I tried to restore it through our parents since they were still friends, even getting his number, but no matter what I tried, I never received a reply. Eventually, after trying for what felt like years, I asked myself, Do I really respect myself that little to chase someone who doesn't have the decency to reply? And I deleted everything related to him. Story 38. One of the smartest people I know, talented in almost everything he did. I grew up feeling jealous of him. In the late 90s, he discovered speed and ecstasy, and years of abuse changed him, even affecting his appearance. When he was on ecstasy, his face would sag, and over time, that droopy face became his permanent look. The final straw was discovering he had sold some of my belongings he had borrowed and then lied about it, blaming others. I miss him a lot, but the person I miss is gone now. Story 39. He got into a relationship and suddenly began to only hang out with his new boyfriend's friends, neglecting his own. Any invitation to go out or have dinner was declined with the excuse that he couldn't afford it, even though I offered to pay several times. A week later, I saw his Instagram story of him in Miami with his boyfriend, yet he claimed he couldn't pay for dinner when I was excited to tell him I got engaged. Story 40. She burst into a dinner party of people we didn't know to make an announcement. She didn't knock on the door. The guests were seated at the table, and she loudly claimed that I had given her herpes, which was not true. The hostess of the party, who was a friend from work, was aware of both of us, so she informed me in private. That moment shattered my trust, and I cut off all contact with her. That was 40 years ago. Story 41. My friend got a girlfriend, and every other priority just faded away. If it didn't involve her or her family, it was irrelevant. His brother mentioned that he doesn't even make time for his nephew. That's kind of sad. Really? Story 42. I told her my ex sexually assaulted me. She took his side and called me dramatic, then started dating him and told me I need to get over him because he convinced her I just wanted to get back together with my rapist. Yeah, Stephanie, you can have him. No amount of explaining, showing screenshots where he admits his actions, or directly stating, he raped me. I don't want to date or be friends with him, could convince her otherwise. Some people love denial. Story 43. We were friends since elementary school, and he was dating a girl from middle school all the way through college. I had planned a huge road trip with our childhood friend group. Took about 6 months to organize everything and get everyone on board. My friend and his girlfriend broke up over something trivial. He told us he couldn't make the trip because it was hard on him. We all canceled and stayed in town out of solidarity. I offered to hang out, spend time with him, and be there for him. He apparently had another friend group he had known for a couple of months and took the same road trip with them. He left on my birthday after saying he couldn't make it to the celebratory lunch with us. Shortly after that, everyone in our group distanced themselves from him, but I was the first to make it clear that I no longer wanted any association with him. Story 44. Not lifelong friendships, but I was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2015, and I quickly learned who my true friends were when many others essentially disappeared from my life over the course of a year. Story 45. She had a significant victim complex and managed to create a major crisis out of any minor inconvenience. I felt sorry for her, so I was there for her, listened to her, and offered advice every day, sometimes for hours. I essentially became her personal therapist. Until one day, I faced a difficult time and needed her support. After a few attempts to discuss what was on my mind, she responded, "Sorry, but I don't have time for your drama." So that was it. Story 46. Never put any effort into anything, whether at school or in personal relationships. He always blames everyone else except himself for his own failings, showing a complete lack of accountability. The final straw was when he said he wouldn't be a groomsman because my wedding was too far. I drove 12 hours to be one of his. He also began drinking the orange beverage for no reason whatsoever. Story 47. I haven't ended this friendship, but I have stepped back from it. I grew up with my friend, and his family wasn't the greatest. His mother worked in a strip club, and his father was a bit stern, like a typical blue-collar father of the baby boomer or Generation X era. His parents divorced, and the home life deteriorated further. He fell in with the wrong crowd in high school, and we drifted apart. I left but would reconnect years later whenever I returned to town. I always made an effort to see him. My father died in January 2024, And since this guy was like another brother to me and like another son to my father, I hoped he would join us at the memorial. He promised he would be there but never showed. My older brother's wife graduated with her master's degree in May of that same year, and I invited him again, giving him about a month's notice and reminding him a couple of times leading up to it. He assured me he would be there, but he never showed. I still care for him like a brother, but I came to realize he just wasn't in a place mentally or emotionally to maintain lasting adult friendships, likely due to everything he experienced as a child. I will leave the decision to reach out to him, but I wouldn't be surprised if I never heard from him again. Story 48. Sometimes it is a strange experience that is hard to explain. I have stopped talking to some close friends for no specific reason, just growing apart and becoming different people who no longer connect, I suppose. I have accepted that some friendships have an expiration date. Move on. Be grateful they were a part of your life. Next. Story 49. This ended a lifelong friendship in our circle of 4 friends. During the height of COVID-19, my friend had separated from her husband the previous year and was alone. She asked our friend Jane if she could be part of her family bubble, as this was allowed and encouraged for individuals living alone so they didn't have to be completely isolated. Anne came from a difficult family background and had no support, and Jane always told her that family is who you make it. It's not just your blood. We, meaning our friend group, can be your sisters. Jane was particularly anxious about COVID-19 but wouldn't discuss it. She would cancel plans at the last minute. During the pandemic, Jane told Anne that she couldn't be part of her family bubble. Her daughter had met someone, and immediately Jane invited him and his family over to be part of her circle, even though they were strangers. It was very important for her to welcome them with open arms, but unimportant to do the same for her longtime friend of 30 years. I tried to get Anne and Jane to talk about it, but Jane wouldn't acknowledge that and was deeply hurt, and didn't want a confrontational fight, so that ended our longtime friend group. I see Anne all the time and Jane a few times a year, but it's very awkward and a total shame. Story 50. I took my phone and sent a message mocking me to all of my contacts. I only found out because a few of them called and asked who was responsible for this. Story 51. My lifelong best friend was in town and did not contact me. I took her to 2 expensive concerts, attended her father's funeral, where her husband gave me a disapproving look, and generally did all the work. After about 50 years of friendship, I realized she did not want to be friends with me. She called in 2019 when my mother passed away, 6 months after she claimed she just heard, and I brushed her off. I have not contacted her since and do not want to see her again. Story 52. Knowing my addiction issues, he bought me a present for New Year's Eve, a full bag of cocaine. He proceeded to cry and guilt me for being a bad friend, saying that I didn't like his expensive gift. So I did what addicts do. He put me in a rideshare and sent me home at 3 a.m. on New Year's Eve, high as one can be. I don't remember the ride or getting into my house. I never talked to him again, and it will be 3 years this year since that happened. I realized he could have killed me, or I could have been assaulted or worse by the driver, and no one would have known. Story 53. I confronted them about their unacceptable behavior towards another friend, and they reacted aggressively. They had criticized me frequently throughout our 17-year friendship, yet they couldn't handle even a small amount of criticism from me. This made me realize that they never saw me as an equal and always looked down on me. I greet them when I see them on the street, but we are not friends. Story 54. A guy I was friends with from 7th grade through the end of high school overheard me talking to a friend about some books we were reading. He laughed and said, "Who reads?" I lost interest in our friendship after that. Story 55. My friend became involved with conspiracy theories and anti-vaccine beliefs, and it wasn't as simple as our values being different. She talked about her new views constantly and was incredibly mean and insulting about it. Took over her entire personality. Story 56. I asked her to be my maid of honor at my wedding, but she seemed upset with me for getting married. After I sent out invitations, she sent a card that simply said, "Thanks, but we won't be attending," and eventually unfriended me on social media. I was heartbroken, and 13 years later, I still haven't heard from her. Even after I sent her a thoughtful card when I saw her mother in the obituaries a couple of years ago. I always respected that she was against marriage, but it seemed she couldn't get over the fact that I wasn't. Story 57. I had a hysterectomy with postoperative complications, including 2 allergic reactions and a blood clot. A week and a half after surgery, one of my students died. My boss didn't even inform me. I found out from a colleague and another student who was his best friend. My daughter was then going to cancel a trip we had already paid for. I tried talking to a friend about all of these issues because it felt like it was one thing after another. He told me the problem was my hormones. When I asked him to stop bringing that up, he accused me of censoring him. It was then I realized he held misogynistic views because, even though I was going through a really hard time, he blamed everything on my hormones from the hysterectomy. Story 58. I had a good friend join the United States Navy because he needed money to finish college. I'm not sure who came back 4 years later, but that person was a Christian and had bigoted views, wanting all kinds of wars. Rest in peace. Story 59. A friend I've known for over 15 years has alienated me and most of our friend group. He was always an abrasive person, but we all knew he had a good heart and, when the chips were down, would do anything to help. Our group is made up of LGBT individuals. Not by intent, but like attracts like. As time went by, he became a libertarian and insisted he was far smarter than anyone else politically. He also adopted a confrontational attitude and would constantly argue with us about trivial matters because he considered himself a debater. These arguments would always end with the rest of us telling him to stop, as he would push it too far, resulting in frustration for everyone, including himself. Eventually, he gave me an ultimatum claiming that I had changed. I explained that he was the problem and that we were worried about him. He refused to change, so I left along with my wife and a few other friends, and then others who didn't want to be the only ones left to manage him. Most of the time, I see him sitting alone on our Discord server. 2 of our friends check in on him out of loyalty and pity, as he helped us in the past, but it's clear that everyone is now much happier without his influence. It's disheartening. I truly mourn the person I knew before he changed, the man of reason and rationality he believes he still is. Story 60. I became chronically ill when we were 17, during our years of partying. I started declining more and more Saturday nights in clubs because I could no longer physically handle it. She had little understanding of this and acted as though I was letting her down. The situation came to a head when she wanted to plan a week of partying in Spain, and I told her that it was just not possible for me. After that, the friendship faded and ended. We had been best friends since we were 3 years old. I thought she would be in my life forever. Life never goes as you expect it to. Note: the added words clarify that it was the friendship that ended, not me personally. Story 61. She was always a little jealous of me, and when I announced I was getting married, her first question was, "Oh my, what are you going to do with that hair?" Story 62. A complete mental breakdown occurred when my best friend and roommate was taken by the sheriff's department under a court order from his parents and placed involuntarily into psychiatric care due to concerns that he posed a danger to himself or others. He was released due to an error by the Veterans Affairs. I filed a protective order against him and recently completed the eviction process. Last weekend, he attempted to force entry into my house while my sister was home alone. We discovered that he broke in through a window in the middle of the night and tried to set up an ambush for her. I have now installed security cameras both inside and outside and have purchased a pistol. The court date for the protective order is next week. Story 63. Good old-fashioned narcissism and bullying. It even came with a denial, attack, and reversal of roles to control the narrative. After I went no contact, he waged a one-man smear campaign against me in a failed attempt to turn my friends against me, including trying to weasel his way into my girlfriend's good graces to get to me. All of these attempts failed spectacularly because I essentially did nothing while he kept proving my point about him with his abusive behavior. Now he's just the subject of ridicule from the past, and looking back on it, I'm glad I finally stood up to him. Story 64. Religious rhetoric. I am no longer a religious person, but I am not anti-religion. People can believe or not believe whatever they want. However, when someone talks about their beliefs being superior to others for any reason or tries to impose their beliefs on me, I tune out. They also use the phrase God's will to explain anything and everything, which makes me want to disengage from the conversation. Story 65. COVID, my friend who is admittedly not very smart, decided he was a politics expert and a doctor. He compared the lockdown to concentration camps. Story 66. He went off the political deep end when Trump ran in 2016, and I ignored a lot of it. When COVID hit, he chose to post a meme referencing wearing a mask during the pandemic as the equivalent of volunteering to get on a train to a concentration camp. This post came after a negative comment on my post about my wife making masks for the family. I reminded him of my heritage and how the part of my family that remained in Germany never survived. His response was, "So what?" Still rings true. I didn't bother responding. I just removed him from social media and haven't said a word to him since. Story 67. My best friend, whom I grew up with, kept getting drunk and wetting the area where she was sleeping, including my work colleague's couch and my own bed on my birthday. We lived about a 3-hour drive apart, so I didn't see her regularly. I pleaded with her to talk to me about it. I wanted to support her and help her, whether it was a drinking problem or a social issue. She flat out refused to discuss it at all. I am sure she felt ashamed, but her demeanor suggested that she didn't care. I haven't seen her in 10 years, and it still hurts a lot. Story 68. She was unvaccinated and refused to take a COVID-19 test before seeing me. My mother was terminally ill and severely immunocompromised, so I was trying to minimize the risk of getting COVID-19 so I could still see my mom. She refused to take a test twice, despite kind and calm requests and explanations, on the basis that she didn't want to get a sinus infection. This was during the time of nasal swabs, which are sterile and cannot cause infection. I am sure it wasn't about a sinus infection. It was about control. She had been annoyed because I hadn't validated her anti-vaccine stance in the past. Similarly, I know she wanted more validation for her religious views, which she acquired in her 30s and which I didn't share. I told her I was happy her faith made her happy, but I think she wanted me to truly share her beliefs. I also said that her sister's sexuality was fine with me when she stated that a wedding of 2 women was not what God wants. I think all of those different views threatened the way she saw the world and how she saw herself. Her last texts thanked me for sharing my views regarding COVID-19 and its potential to harm my mom, then became pseudo-concerned when I didn't reply. I read the whole situation as wanting to express whatever she wanted to me while still feeling like a nice person, hoping for my validation. I didn't reply to her, but I still wonder whether the mature thing to do would have been to clearly reply and state that I didn't want to stay in contact. It has taken me until now, over a year later, to see through the pain and formulate what I might have said. We had been friends since the first days of high school, over 20 years. Essentially, we acquired very different views as adults, but I can't pretend her attitude toward my mom and the difficult journey my family had to endure wasn't devastating. Life can be a painful journey at times, that's for sure. Story 69. He dated my ex just a day after our relationship ended. We shared drinks the night we broke up to ease the pain. Then he betrayed my trust. I never spoke to him again. Story 70. I had a friend in college with whom I was close, but we were not best friends. She embraced various identities during our years together. She was a raver, a goth, a hippie, whatever she felt like being. After graduating, she became a teacher, while I chose to be an adventurer. She married soon after college. She claimed to be a good Christian and did not have sex until marriage. Perhaps that is why she rushed into it. The man she married did not share the same motivations, and a few months after the wedding, she asked him why. He revealed that he was gay, and she decided to annul the marriage. She was devastated. For about 6 months, I helped her process and rationalize what had happened, reminding her that there were still many wonderful things in the world. However, when marriage equality was passed, she declared it the worst thing to ever happen in American history. I told her that I did not have space for that kind of hate in my life. While it may have seemed reasonable to her, she was denying equal rights to some very special people. I have not spoken to her since, but I understand she has remarried. Story 71. A college friend became involved in the right-wing YouTube community. He was always somewhat unpleasant, but that encouraged an environment where being unrestrained, unapologetic, and argumentative was acceptable. Story 72. Racism and certain media outlets started it. The last straw was him complaining about Peanuts characters displayed in brown on a Mexican grocery store window. Story 73. I was asked why I couldn't date white girls after I began dating my now wife and started wearing the red MAGA hat. I was pretty done after that. Story 74. I recently ended a long friendship. I realized that when I spoke, she didn't listen. She told me I had too many problems when I would try to get her to hear me. It was always about her problems, and most of those issues were self-inflicted. I am happy to be living with much less drama, and some of my problems improved after the friendship ended. Story 75. Went absolutely mad during COVID. First, he was willing to forge documents to get the vaccine early and then blamed people dying on the vaccine, claiming that people were lying dead in the streets from it. He completely lost his mind and was ready to fight over every issue that arose. Story 76. We were friends for about 14 years. The final straw was that he became increasingly racist over time, which I disapproved of and did not want to discuss with him. Additionally, he openly flirted with my then-girlfriend when they met for the first time, despite knowing about our relationship. He began showing off his muscles and demonstrating his strength by doing random push-ups. He was the type of person seeking attention. I spoke about it later and he told me, "You know you're like this because you're on cloud 9. You'll come running back to me as soon as the relationship ends." Well, it's been a year since the relationship ended, and 6 months since we last spoke. I don't think so. Story 77. My friend put us in a difficult situation where I had to run from the police. I didn't even know I was his getaway driver. I never spoke to him again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.